Hey, welcome to Light Church and welcome to our virtual gathering. I'm so excited that you are here joining us for this gathering. I can't wait to share this experience with you. We've got one song of worship and a short message. I hope that you leave today feeling encouraged and inspired. See you after.
You were the Word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is, what a beautiful name it is, the name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is, nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is, the name of Jesus. You didn't want heaven without us, so Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is, what a wonderful name it is, the name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is, nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is, the name of Jesus. What a wonderful name it is, the name of Jesus. Death could not hold you, the veil tore before you. You silenced the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring the praise of your glory, and for you are raised to life again. 'Cause you have no rival, you have no equal, and now and forever, God, you reign. And yours is the kingdom, yours is the glory, yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is, what a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a powerful name it is, nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus.
I remember being down in Cornwall on holiday, and I was with two mates, and we were on Fistral Beach, which is a beach that's very well known for surfing, and three of us, we really enjoyed surfing, so we were in the water, and it was like a particularly windy day. And I remember being stood maybe waist height in the water, and there was such a strong current. And it wasn't like there was big waves smashing over, sort of pushing us around. It wasn't like there were really strong rip tides. It wasn't like the tide was coming in and throwing us onto the beach. It was simply this like really strong undercurrent. And maybe it was caused by the wind. I don't know. I'm not a beachologist or whatever you would need to specialize in to know that. And it was kind of like the water, it was a really strong undercurrent that was pulling us over to the right. Now, if you know Fistral very well, if you're stood on the beach, if you look over to the left, there are a load of rocks. And if you're in the water facing the beach, all these rocks are on your right. And this is where this big undercurrent was just pulling us. And what would often happen is you'd be in the water, you'd have your surfboard, and you'd be kind of like paddling out. And all of a sudden you would just look over and you would be 10 meters away from where you were. Now, if you've ever been to a beach in Cornwall, you will know that the lifeguards put out the little flags. And if you step a single centimeter outside of those flags, the lifeguards don't just come over to you and they just say, "Hey, excuse me, nice sir, hello, kind gentleman, you have just drifted slightly outside of them. It probably wasn't intentional. If you could, just head back over into the flags." Now what they like to do is they razz their big 4x4 truck over to the point where you are, but like 100 meters away down the beach, and they announce over this loudspeaker system, "Oh, you with the green surfboard, yeah, you idiot. You're outside, like, can you get over?" And you're like embarrassed, everyone's looking at you. And because this current was so strong, you would essentially have to either fight the current to get back to where you needed to be, or you had to get out the water, walk along the beach and get back in where you were supposed to. And what we found was a successful method for us to stay inside where we needed to be. Instead of just going about our thing and checking, every 10 minutes or so where we were, what we did is we'd pick a place on the beach, like maybe it was a beach hut or someone's bag or something, and we'd stay in line with it. And every few minutes you would just check to see if you were in line with the bag or the beach hut or whatever sort of anchor point on the shore that you have found or that you had made. And it meant that instead of being pushed in this direction you didn't want to go, towards these rocks and then getting shouted at and humiliated on the beach, it meant that, and then you had to make this big overcorrection and like get out, walk over. It meant that you could essentially correct as you went along. You could stay in line. Every moment you would begin to drift, you could pull yourself back into the place you needed to be. Now this morning I want to talk about a word, conviction. Conviction is defined as a strongly held or deeply rooted belief in something or someone. Conviction. And I think this idea of conviction plays really into this picture, because this is the thing. In our life, in the sort of ever shifting sands of our life, we can often find ourselves pushed around by the culture that we live in. We can often find ourselves pushed around by the various sort of beliefs or ideologies or friendships or relationships or people, whatever it might be. We can find ourselves pushed towards places that we really don't want to go. Push towards places that actually are really unhealthy for us as people. And usually what it takes is this large overcorrection in our life where we have to essentially address the problem, make some big changes and head back to the place that we're supposed to be in. Or maybe if you're a follower of Jesus, you can relate to that picture of the slow drifting, and maybe one place in your life as a follower of Jesus, you're on fire, you're in the place you knew you were supposed to be. And then one day you kind of just woke up and looked back at your life and realized, wow, I slowly drifted, and I don't really recognize the person I'm looking at in the mirror. I slowly drifted away from the person I was designed to be, drifted away from the follower of Jesus that I'm supposed to be. And I think that picture of that anchor point, that's something on the shore that holds you in line with your purpose, holds you in line with something that you need to be in line with. And for a follower of Jesus, conviction is this word. Conviction is that anchor point. I want to offer you this anchor point this morning, this deeply rooted, strongly held belief in something or someone that will hold you in the place that you are supposed to be, and ultimately in purpose and in relationship with Jesus. So we are humans. If you are watching and you are not a human, I'm afraid this is not for you. But if you are a human and you're watching this morning, if you want to build something in your life or do anything of significance or depth or anything that you want to have longevity or significance, you need to be able to stay committed The goal in life is to persist long enough in the same direction according to our design or our purpose, or maybe you're watching and you're not a Christian and you're just figuring this stuff out and you're like, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? What does it mean? Well, I want to encourage you, if you want to do anything in your life, you need to be able to persist towards a goal. Without that anchor point to fix yourself to, you will never be able to stay tethered to that purpose, tethered to that goal, tethered to that intention. And conviction is just that, it's that anchor point. And if we do not have conviction, we will find ourselves drifting far from where we are supposed to be. Interestingly enough, actually, to sort of build the tension of why this is important, we live in a culture that actually really loves and puts on a pedestal fluidity. Fluidity, in fact, one that actually celebrates fluidity, fluidity of truth, fluidity of reality, fluidity of feelings, anything that is sort of firmly rooted or deeply held. If you look back over the past 5-10 years, anything that has been deeply held or deeply rooted, or even a belief or a conviction that people would say, especially one that would be assumed as universal, would often be called traditional. I remember growing up, and when people talk about marriage, or people talk about, I don't know, going to church on a Sunday, or people talk about any form of commitment. It might not even be to do with faith. It might be to do with, I don't know, something else, like sitting around the dinner table as a family or something like that. 10 years ago, when I was sort of leaving school, you would call that traditional. People would say, that's very traditional. It's very traditional. Then you kind of zip a little bit further on, and maybe 5 years ago, we would talk about these sort of traditions or these things, these convictions, these deeply held beliefs, especially ones that were universal. We would call them conservative. Oh, that's a little conservative, isn't it? Someone said to me recently, yeah, that's quite a conservative view for such a young person. And when I was talking about a belief that I had, or talking about something, the way that I lived my life, that's quite a conservative view for someone your age. But actually now in the culture that we live in, this idea of holding a belief and believing something to be true that's universally true for all people is now beyond tradition. It's beyond being conservative, and is now seen as oppressive. Now, we live in a culture where there is not one truth, and kindness is the highest virtue. So in our culture where we seem to believe that there is no truth, and anyone who believes that there is a universal truth is just an oppression technique used to control people. Maybe you're hearing a few things here that's making you go, oh, this sounds like I've seen this before. Whoa, he's touching on some stuff that I really believe here. The idea in our culture of that there is a universal truth, there is a universal good, that all of humanity is designed to live in relation to or relationship with, is seen as oppressive. And if kindness is this highest virtue, in other words, to say that someone else's truth is not true is ultimately the highest form of evil, to reject someone else's view. And don't hear me wrong this morning, I'm not encouraging you to go around rejecting people and judging people. That's not what this is. But the interesting thing is if we live in this culture of fluidity, and we live in that picture of, as I was saying when I was surfing, where things are shifting ever so slowly and they're able to move, and truth is not seen as universal anymore. We're not able to speak something that we believe to be good for all people. We can actually find ourselves with this fluidity unpicking the very fabric of our faith. If you're here this morning, you're seeking this idea of what is Jesus, who is Jesus, what is it to be a Christian, or you're here this morning, you are a follower of Jesus, I want to urge you, or kind of like warn you of this fluidity that can very easily seep into our faith and actually unpick the very way that we approach Jesus, the very way that we see our faith in God, our relationship with God. And actually what can happen is our ability to follow Him can be significantly impaired, because no longer is Jesus the only way to relationship with God, the only way for humans to truly flourish according to their design. Jesus becomes just one of the ways to happiness, like a stroll down the cosmic buffet table of religions. Like we can take a bit of this and a bit of that, and maybe we will be happy at the end of our lives. If we're not careful, this fluidity of truth, this fluidity, this approach to, we don't need convictions. We can just go with our feelings. We can just go with whatever looks good, whatever seems good to other people. This fluidity can really attack our faith. And let me encourage you this morning, before I go into this, this is not a dig your heels in moment. This is not a oppose the world, shake your fists. Because let me encourage you, the world needs no more angry Christians shouting at them and telling them what is good or what is needed. That's not what this is. This is an encouragement to those of you this morning who are seeking Jesus. Those of you who are trying your best to follow him with your whole heart. This is a sort of like a cautionary message or an encouragement, a challenge to say, we need to be a people of conviction. A people that know who they are, that know who God is, that finds that anchor point on the shore, and that stays in line throughout our life. And ultimately, when we look back at our life, we can look back and say, I stepped into the future that was placed within me. I lived the life that God called me to live. I became the person that God designed me to be. So my prayer for you today, and for, I guess, every day, is that in relationship with Jesus, we can strive to be more like him. We can become the people, become the church that he has made us to be. And if we want to do that, there is a deepening that is required in us, a conviction that is required. So hopefully it sounds good for you this morning. So what is the remedy? What is this conviction that we need to have? Well, I want to talk about conviction in faith, conviction in what it means to be a Christian, conviction in this word we use called the gospel. What does it mean to be a Christian? What is that deeply rooted, strongly held belief in something or someone that we need to have as people in order to live the lives that we've been called to live, to be the people we've been designed to be? I want us to look at Romans chapter 1, verse 16 and 17, and we're going to read this out, and I believe this speaks perfectly into this moment. Let's be a people of conviction. So let's look at this. Romans chapter 1, 16 and 17 says this, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith." This is Paul. The Apostle Paul is writing to the church in Rome. He said, I'm not ashamed of this gospel that I have said I believe in. What is that in Paul? It is conviction. I'm not ashamed of this gospel. I have a deeply rooted, strongly held belief in this gospel of this guy called Jesus and all that he did for us. A little bit of context for Paul so we can understand why he's writing this. We can understand what is he saying. What does this mean? The Bible was not written to us, but it was written for us. So it was written to a group of people, a church in Rome. Paul is writing to this church that exists in Rome. Now, Rome would always teach that Rome, so the empire, is completely superior. That the emperor is Lord. So for example, it would be like us in Britain saying that Britain is superior and the Queen is God. That's essentially what it would be like. And so Paul's writing to this context, this church in Rome. The Roman Empire places the Roman Empire at a very, very high level of sort of superiority over everything. They essentially believed that Rome would save you. So that's the sort of marketing line of Rome here is that the emperor is Lord. He knows best. Come be part of Rome. We will look after you. You follow us. Now, it was quite an oppressive regime in that sense. They were brutal people. And they're essentially saying, like, come be part of this. You'll be protected under us. You will flourish under us. You will also live in complete fear of us. And that is how they maintain their power. So for Paul to write into this context and say, I'm not ashamed of this gospel that pertains to say that there is something higher than Rome, that there is something beyond Rome, there's something bigger and more powerful than Rome in the person of Jesus, who is one of the Trinity in that sense, the triune God. He is saying that God is God over Rome. Rome is not superior, but also this is the thing about the Roman Empire, is they were what we call religiously syncretistic. In other words, like I mentioned about that cosmic buffet table, Rome were chilling. You could believe whatever you wanted to believe in that sense, as long as you would toe the Roman line. So there's like polytheism. In other words, multiple gods, multiple expressions of gods, multiple sun god, the god of fertility, the god of sex, the god of pleasure, the god of passion, all these sort of different gods they would have, and they would essentially allow everyone to live together in that sense. But the problem with the Christian faith is this, the Christian faith set out to say, well, no, that isn't the blueprint for human flourishing. There is one God, and he has made known himself to us in the person of Jesus. So I want to walk through, that's the context that Paul was writing into, that helps give us a picture of why Paul was saying what he was saying. So I want to walk through this passage and help us as individuals this morning, watching this virtual gathering, wherever you are, whatever your story is, to kind of demonstrate to us what it looks like to be a people of conviction in the gospel, or conviction in faith in Jesus. So Paul kicks off, he says, I am not ashamed. I am not ashamed. Paul knew what he believed. This wasn't just like, yeah, I'm kind of into this thing. I really like the social circles of it. I kind of like how it looks. I guess I'll vouch for it. That's not what Paul's saying. He's writing a letter to this group of people that feel like a resistance cell in the middle of a pretty hostile environment, saying, hey, I am not ashamed of this gospel that we believe in. He had a deep conviction in his faith in Jesus and all that Jesus had done for humanity. And he is encouraging the church in Rome to have the same. I am not ashamed of this gospel. And then he says, it is the power of God that brings salvation. This is the interesting thing. Some people, and maybe you've fallen into this own sort of space in your own life, we can believe that the gospel brings power, like it's some upgrade on our humanity, that it's like we can kind of use the gospel and it brings us some extra power that comes from within us or comes from our emotions. I don't know. Maybe you've fallen into that space. I know in my life, sometimes I've seen the gospel as this tool, but that's not what Paul is saying. He is saying it is the power. The gospel does not bring power in the sense, it does not add some power to our life. It is the very power in our lives. It is the very experience that is the embodiment of God's power. The gospel message, the story, the words of the gospel are literally the power of God. He's saying it doesn't bring power, it is power. And then Paul used this word, the gospel. The gospel. And you might be there this morning like, I've heard this word, I don't really understand what it means. And then we can ask the question, well, what is the gospel? Well, in a deeper sense, what is Paul's gospel? So let's look at what Paul writes. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 1 to 5. And this is Paul essentially outlining what he believes the gospel to be. He says this, now brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, if you hold firmly. Just pause there for a second. What is Paul talking about? If you hold firmly. What did we define conviction as? A deeply rooted, strongly held belief. What's Paul saying? This is the gospel in which you need to have a deeply rooted, strongly held conviction, a belief in. So he says, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you, otherwise you have believed in vain. And then this is where he outlines what the gospel is. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for your sin according to the scriptures, that he was buried and that he was raised again on the third day according to the scriptures. This is Paul's definition of the gospel. And this is a framework that you and I can use to kind of base our conviction on, or base our conviction in. This is the framework. Let's understand this for a second. Let's go right back to the origin story. This is called the sort of gospel arc, or this salvation arc. So God creates humanity. It lives in perfect relationship. Humanity and God, creator and created, live in perfect harmony together. We had this perfect, unbroken relationship with God. And then what happens is humanity severs that relationship by essentially buying into this idea that they could be gods, that we could be gods in ourselves. It was a bit of greed. It was a bit of narcissism. It was this selfish view, but essentially was tricked into this view that we'd be better off without God. So humanity severed the relationship with God. And then that's when sin entered the world. Every single one of us, no matter who you are, no matter how many old ladies you've helped cross the road, or how good you think you are, we are all sinners and we are all messed up people. You'd be like, whoa, stop coming at me this morning. Just take a second to look at the world. Look around and go, what would support the view? Is humanity inherently good in the sense that we just have a sort of lean in towards just doing good and kindness to people? Or are we bent towards self-sabotage and we bent towards evil and dysfunction in our life, I think a second look at human history would probably lean to the latter and say, we have a lean in towards destruction, especially destruction of self. So sin entered the world. So then God is looking at his creation and this severance, this gap, and he needs to find a way to buy back, to bridge the void between creator and created again. So he sends himself, his one and only son, in the person of Jesus, to live a human life. And Jesus walks on this earth. This is called the sort of the sending. So God sends himself. And then we have the living. So Jesus lives this human life. He assumes humanity. In other words, he steps into it fully and he lives the human life. He experiences what humanity experiences. And then he is strung up on a cross, one of the Roman torture techniques to publicly shame and humiliate people. And on that cross, this is that moment, that filling of the void, when something needed to be done to bring humanity back into relationship with God. Jesus hung on the cross. He took on that sin, that payment that was owed, that something that was like, God needed to bring us back, needed to bridge the void, to pay for the sin. So in other words, it was like the punishment for the sin, the consequence of that action. Jesus came and he hung on the cross, took on our sin, took on our shame, took on our guilt, and he hung there, he died, and he was placed in a tomb. This is what Paul's saying. He was in a tomb for 3 days, and it looks like death had won. In this moment, the skies are dark. It looks like in this moment, wow, like God really isn't as powerful as everyone would have thought he was. But then on the third day, he rose again from the tomb. And this is an interesting demonstration here. It's a demonstration of God's power. This resurrection is a demonstration of God's authority over death. That not even death, which for humans is our final thing. There's nothing that is more powerful within life as death for humans. And God demonstrated his power over death. So Jesus, he resurrects from the grave to give us a hope and a future of relationship and purpose and wholeness. And then he ascends back to heaven to, again, it's like a moment of Jesus being like, this is where I came from, just to show you that I am truly God. He ascends back to heaven. It says he's seated at the right hand of the Father. So he is in heaven. He is God. So that's that salvation arc, the gospel arc. That is the sort of the process or the story, or that is the gospel that sets us apart as Christians. That's the conviction that we have as Christians, that truly happened, and it happened for you and for I. How significant is that? So we talked this morning, maybe you're here like, I've never been a Christian before. I've never really heard this story before. I've never really understood this before. Or maybe you've been a Christian all your life. I want to encourage you, this is the gospel. This is the anchor point on the shore that we need to latch onto. This is the faith that we have in Jesus. So it says, Paul goes on, he says this, for in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. So in the Greek, this idea of righteousness isn't a righteousness that looks at dirty, broken sinners and says, you suck. It is a gift that God gives to every single sinner that turns their back on their sin and says that they want to follow Jesus. So if you are on the edge of following Jesus this morning, when you turn from that sin and say yes to Jesus, he gifts you his righteousness. What does that mean? It means right standing with God. It means that the Creator and the created lived in severance. And in this moment, through the gift of righteousness, we are brought back together. So this gospel is a gift of righteousness. God treated his son as a sinner so that he could treat a sinner like you and me as his son or his daughter. So how does this work? How do we do it? How do we get it? You're asking this morning, how do I get hold of this gift of righteousness where I can be brought back into right standing with God through all that Jesus did? I want to build this conviction. Or maybe you have been a Christian all your life and I'm like, I've never understood this gospel. What makes me a Christian, a Christ follower? How do I do it? Listen to this. Paul says at the end of that passage in Romans, says the righteous, so that gift of righteousness, it says the righteous will live by faith. The righteous will live by faith. You're asking this morning, well, what's faith? Let's look at it. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 says this, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the what? The conviction of things not seen. It is faith in Jesus and all that he has done for us that allows us to step into a relationship. Faith in faith in what Jesus has done, faith in God, faith in all that he has done. It says it is the assurance of things hoped for. What does that mean? It means it is the assurance that we've been brought back into a relationship with God. It is faith that allows us to stand with conviction in Jesus, and faith that allows us to see him at work, and faith that allows us to know him, and faith that allows us to follow him, faith that allows us to live as his new creation, saved by grace. Maybe you're asking this morning, what can I do? What can I do in this very moment? Well, all you simply need to do is turn from your sin and say yes to Jesus. Maybe you've never done that before. Today, it might be a time for you to step back into relationship with him. But you say, I want to live for something in my life. Humanity was designed to live for something. His name is Jesus, and he has his arm stretched out to you in this very moment. Say, come and live in relationship with me. I have brought you back. Turn from your sin and your dysfunction. Maybe this morning this idea of conviction has been a convictor, has been a challenge for you. Let me encourage you this, the world is crying out for some truth. The more fluid the world goes in its approach to truth, it will be desperate for Christians to say, this is the truth that we believe in. What it does not need, like I said, is angry Christians shouting at people. It needs people that are full of grace and truth, that are willing to head out into the world. Let me put it this way. Friends, we owe the world an encounter with Jesus. We owe the world a church that is on fire in its convictions and its faith in Jesus. That has said we will turn from our sin and live in the way that God has designed us to live. So I want to encourage you today. Maybe it's a moment for you to cross that line of faith for the first time. Maybe it's a time to step back in line, but the call is just the same. It's to stand before God in this very moment. And this is the first conversation you may have. And it is the first of many conversations you will have. Not in this moment will you understand everything about faith in Jesus and life as a Christian, but it is the beginning of a relationship with God, a restored relationship with God. For the first time or for again, I want to encourage you to simply say this: Jesus, I turn from my sin, I turn from my ways, and I give you my life. I give you my past, my present, and my future, my brokenness, my hopes and my dreams, and my future. And I give you my life. I pray that today is a day that changes your life forever, not because of my words, but because you have had an encounter with the living God who wants to know you and be in relationship with you this morning. Your life is too precious to be scratching around for the rest of your life, searching out for happiness in hollow places. Today is a day that God has called you to live the life that he's made you to live. So I pray that today is a significant day for you. Thanks for being with us.
What an incredible gathering we've had. I've loved sharing this moment with you. Maybe you've got some questions or you've crossed that line of faith this morning. Then make sure to connect with us. Head to light.church/connect or email us at hello@light.church. We'd love to chat. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the like button, leave a comment maybe, but make sure you subscribe to this channel so you never miss out on anything that we're sharing with you. Can't wait to see you again at our next virtual gathering. Bye!